Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, the battle over the bathroom. Vancouver School Board wants to make life easier for its transgender students, but not everybody is on board. So Malika Bilal, digital producer of the stream, whenever we do transgender as a subject, there's some confusion with our very large community,
right.
Because they don't always tap into LGBTQ issues. So we're going to help them with this discussion because they need to get it
right, exactly.
to enjoy the discussion.
Well, and that explains why a lot of the conversation is focused around bathrooms and it hasn't gone deeper. But it's also focused around the misunderstanding between sexual identity and gender identity.
Right.
So it's broken down pretty well on Facebook. Liz wrote, "It's disgusting. I would not let my girls go to that school if it means that boys can just come and go where they like, claiming to have," as she writes, "a screwed sexuality." Well, Elizabeth writes back and she says, "It's not a different sexuality, it's a different gender identity. Sexuality is about sexual attraction. Gender identity is about an innate sense of self." So we want you at home to join this conversation as well with your own questions and comments. Just make sure you use the hashtag AJStream.
And while you're doing that, have a look at some of the other stories that you as a community are following on Twitter. There's a lot of research that has found transgender youth to be more susceptible to suicide, bullying and violence than other youngsters, including those who are gay. Take a look at this study by the Canadian Human Rights Trust. Back in 2011, it looked at students who identified as being transgender. 78% said they felt unsafe at school. 74% reported being bullied, and just after half said that they felt particularly unsafe in toilets and locker rooms.
I can tell you about the verbal and the physical harassment and the abuse. I can tell you about being taunted and being yelled at and being spit on when you try to use the washrooms that correspond with your gender identity.
So it's testimony like that that persuaded the Vancouver School Board to adopt the controversial policy allowing trans students to choose the bathroom that matches their gender identity. While many people are very happy with the new rules, opponents feel the policy doesn't line up with their traditional values and claim the school board is trying to idealise the issue. So joining us to talk about this, we have PATTI BACCHUS. She is chairperson of the Vancouver Board of Education. Also in Vancouver, we have CORMAC O'Dwyer, a trans youth advocate, and his mother, Julia. And in California, where students can legally use whatever public school toilet they want to, we have Brad DACUS. He's president of the Pacific Justice Institute. So welcome aboard. It's great to have you all here on the stream. Cormac, I have to start with you. This thing about the bathroom, why is it getting people so upset? What's going on? Explain it to us.
Well, I mean, all I can nail it down to really is maybe that some people don't quite understand what's involved with being trans. I mean, I've had many people now at this stage who are, wondering about this issue, who have said, well, why can't trans students just stay in the bathroom of the gender they were born in? And I don't know how I can say it any more clearly, but I think if I walked into your daughter's bathroom and started using the facilities there, I think you would have a problem with that. I would have a problem with that. I would feel highly uncomfortable, being in a women's bathroom. And I think people need to really realize what the full picture of this is, what this really entails.
Patty, what's your take on this? Because you're the chair of the school board in Vancouver, and there's you've changed or added some policy guidelines that help you actually with your LGBTQ approach to schools and how students should behave and how teachers need to behave with them. Why did you come to this decision?
Well, this was really just about codifying what is already practiced in schools.
Right.
We made a commitment as a board over 10 years ago through policy to provide safe, inclusive, supportive, and welcoming schools for all LGBT plus students and staff and their families. And what we had heard was there were gaps in the policy in terms of being consistent about how we support and accommodate students who are transgendered, and that we weren't being consistent in every school. Not every staff person knew what it was they were expected to do, and families didn't know what to expect as well when they were coming in to have those discussions with the school. So this really provides clarity and consistency so that everyone knows the expectation. We are looking to make sure every student feels safe and welcome and included, including students who are transgendered. So in some cases we may give them access to a single stall non-gendered washroom, maybe a staff washroom or one that has been designated for handicap use if they're in a transitional phase where they're not really comfortable picking one or the other. If they're fully transitioned and they would prefer and be more comfortable using the washroom that corresponds with their gender identity, that's also fine. But that comes after a very serious, thoughtful conversation between the school staff and the student and family, and everyone's on board. It isn't a casual decision where students just arrive and make a choice that day.
Well, Patti, I'm glad that you mentioned the single stall bathroom, because that is what a lot of people online are saying. Why don't they just do that? So we have this Facebook comment from Susan who writes, how about removing these boy-girl signs altogether? Why must everything be separated by gender? Now, on the other hand, on Twitter, CORMAC, we have a lot of people sharing their own experiences. This is from Micah, who writes, I was able to use preferred name on my school ID and rosters, etc., growing up in Sweden, but bathrooms were a nightmare. Michael goes on, continues, no policies on bathrooms, so every time going in was kind of a doubtful adventure, often ending with comments and weird looks. And of course, I see you smiling there. You can relate to that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I was fortunate to be in a very, very supportive environment when I went to high school, but and I was encouraged to use whatever bathroom was appropriate for me to use at the time. So I did use the boys' washroom. But because this policy wasn't in place, I was aware, you know, and as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, I was aware when I was using the boys' washroom that as far as the school is concerned, there was no policy that was protecting me in that bathroom. And so I was really, I felt that I was taking on all the risk of being in there at a young age. And, you know, I'm very thankful that other students following my footsteps don't have to take that responsibility on themselves.
See, Brad, I'm intrigued by what's happening in California because it is state law to allow youngsters in public school to use any bathroom they want to. How do you feel about that as a parent?
Right, and yeah, I'll tell you, California is much more radical than Vancouver's adopted. For example, in California, there's no room for parental input at all. Whatever the child comes to school and says, hey, today I feel like I'm a girl, boom, he has instant access to the girls' bathrooms, the girls' locker rooms. And also, if a psychiatrist has examined the child, says, hey, this is not in the child's best interest, this is counter to the therapy that we're taking. Of course, you know, because gender identity dysphoria can be very fluid, just like identity can be very fluid as well, according to the American Psychiatric Association. So this law in California is very draconian. It's a one-size-fits-all, and it also, unfortunately, while it's so important that we're sensitive and accommodating to children and young people who have gender identity dysphoria. It's a real condition. It's something they didn't choose to have. It's something they made up. At the same time, we need to have love and compassion also for the privacy rights of that 13 and 14-year-old girl, where she's undressing in the locker room, and suddenly you have a 16-year-old boy, 100% biological boy, coming in, seeing her, taking off his clothes. And that's what we're faced with in California, because in California, you don't even have any kind of surgery or hormonal transition until the age of 18 when you have parental consent. So in California, it's something very radical. It's not balanced in respecting the rights of everyone, the privacy of all students, along with the special needs of love and compassion and accommodation for those who are going through a gender identity dysphoria.
All right, so Brad, you brought up something that I hadn't even thought about. I was just thinking about comfort at school and making youngsters feel comfortable, whatever their orientation might be. So Julia, parent to parent, how would you answer Brad's concerns?
Well, I'd really like to go back to the bathroom issue, because one of the things that I think people are really not focusing on is that it's all about what you do in the bathroom. It's not really who you are in the bathroom. And in my opinion, I think a transgender youth is probably the least likely person to go and make a scene of themselves in the bathroom. Those kids are really concerned about fitting in. They are the ones that are most likely to be bullied and to be picked on. So, you know, I really don't see this as something that would be coming up, that, you know, they would go into the bathroom and make a big scenario out of it. And the same goes for the change room. I mean, I know that when, you know, CORMAC was changing for PE, he was generally speaking wearing his gym strip underneath his clothes, so he could completely avoid having to, you know, change things and have anybody see him. And this was despite the fact that he was in a school that was very progressive and very open to him, and he was out and everybody knew. So I think this is made into a bigger scenario that I don't feel the reality really reflects.
And Patti, you know, picking up on what Julia said about CORMAC, that when he was changing, that was before this new policy update was implemented. So there's some questions here from our community asking why the big deal now. Have a listen to this video comment sent to us.
Canada is a pluralistic society that protects the rights and needs of all minorities. Protecting a minority is not the same thing as allowing a minority to refuse to recognize another minority's needs. The Vancouver School Board is merely implementing the law of British Columbia, which recognizes gender identity as the legal gender since 1999, when a human rights tribunal ruled on the matter.
So Patti, this policy was in place for about 10 years, or has been in place for about 10 years, so why are we seeing this current outrage?
Well, we've just made revisions to the policy to provide clarity in the regulation section about specific supports for students who are transgendered, really because of experiences like what CORMAC explains, is that while the school said, yes, we support you, we want to ensure you feel safe and welcome, there obviously were some gaps there, and that so students like CORMAC had to kind of be the trailblazers and figure out how this is going to work. We've had that experience now. We've have much better knowledge on what students who are transgendered need to feel truly safe and included and to really thrive at school, because that's the goal. We want these students feeling fully included, to be able just to focus on being a kid and going to school and excelling. And if they're concerned about where am I going to change or where am I going to use the washroom, obviously that is a huge distraction and far worse for many. We know the disproportionate risk in terms of bullying, violence, harassment, and of course leaving school. Many students just won't come to school at a certain point, and that's tragic to me. So really what we're trying to do is make sure we've covered all the bases of what is the day-to-day experience of these students and how can we make that as safe and supportive as we can. And in many cases, we look at that case by case. We work with the student, ideally involving the family, because we know that's the best when students are fully supported both at school and at home. And we come up with a plan to ensure in a really respectful, dignified way that student can go about their daily life at school just like anybody else without having to be worried about some of these situations.
Right. I did hear Brad pipe up this moment.
I have a question for Patti.
Yeah, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, Patti, I have a question. And if you have, like, let's say you have like a 16-year-old boy who has has gender identity dysphoria, and yet he has not had any surgery, anything like that, or any kind of actual transitionary steps, okay, but still has the dysphoria. And you wouldn't, your policy, if I'm understanding right, would not recommend or allow them to go into the locker room and undress and in front of girls who are undressing. You'd be very sensitive and respectful to the privacy of the 13 and 14-year-old girls in that locker room, right? It's an individual basis as to where they are and what their needs are. Is that my understanding correctly?
Well, Brad, what we know and what the evidence will tell you is that those students who are transgendered are the most vulnerable in that situation. We have had many, many transgender students, and we deal with it case by case. Different students are at different stages of their transition. And as CORMAC said, if CORMAC were to go into a girls' locker room now and start changing, I think people might be alarmed. We would look at, where is CORMAC? What are CORMAC's needs, and what would be an appropriate space that would make sense in for the student. Sure. In some cases, that may be going in the opposite gender change rooms, but inappropriate behavior is inappropriate behavior. That's a behavior issue. That's not a gender issue. We have students who behave inappropriately in a locker room setting or washroom, regardless of gender identity. That needs to be dealt with as behavior. That has nothing to do with their gender identity.
What are CORMAC's needs, CORMAC? What do you need at school?
Well, I was just gonna piggyback on what Patty said, in that also I think it's really very unfair to require that particularly in young people and in students, to require that they have hormone therapy or that they take medical procedures to sort of, define that they are now transgender and that they're now, welcome in spaces that they wouldn't be allowed in had they not gone through that medical transition. Because, I mean, particularly from my point of view, I have gone through that medical transition, and you give things up in doing so. And I'm very, very happy that I have done, and my life has really improved greatly in doing so. But it's not fair to ask children to make that decision, and it's not fair to exclude children from spaces where they would feel safe because they're not ready to, have surgery or to go on hormone therapy. And I don't think there's any reason that we need to require that of students.
Well,
and I think really that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Julia, and then we do Brad, and then we do Patty. Go ahead.
All right.
I
just wanted to add to that I think you just really need to be able to follow the lead of the child, and I think in particular kids that are having to grapple with this gender identity at a young age are very self-aware, and I think as a parent, you just need to follow the lead of your child and see where they're at and support them with whatever they need at that time. And I think the new policy updates really help the parent and help the child do that.
Brad, what did you want to add?
Yeah, I just think it's really important that as we look at this, we have a continual balancing of all the children involved in this scenario. For example, in Colorado, we're dealing with a matter where there is a transgender girl, okay, who used to be is still a 100% biological boy, but is going through transgender girl dysphoria. And the other teenage girls in ninth grade feel very uncomfortable in bathrooms, the locker rooms. One girl doesn't even use the restroom because naturally a girl is expected to be very have her privacy very violated potentially when she's using a stall right next to someone who she counts as a biological boy. So,
Brad, I hear you. You're making this point very clearly, and it's a point that you're really sticking to, and I appreciate that. So what would you do then? How do you solve a situation where you make every youngster feel comfortable, regardless of their orientation?
Okay, and I think that's really important because it is everybody, including those students who do have this dysphoria.
So what would you do then? So if I know you've got kids, and if one of your kids tells you, "Hey, Dad, I feel like I'm not quite the right gender," what would you want for them and for them in school?
Right. Well, let me just say, I think every parent needs to look at their child in an individual matter. They need to bring in the proper counseling. 70% of children, for example, in the elementary school level, statistics show work through their dysphoria by the time they reach adulthood, but some don't. And so you have to look at the child where they are. Second, you also need to adopt policies that are accommodative of that child. For example, providing separate restrooms, place them to change as they're in this transition. Many in the psychiatric community, for example, would recommend that for many children, depending on where they are dealing with their dysphoria. But at the same time, you need to implement policies that address bullying, harassment. There's no place for that anywhere in our public schools. And at the same time, have policies that are sensitive to the emotional welfare development of girls and boys in terms of their locker rooms and bathrooms and their privacy, because these kids have anxiety issues as well, and that has to be addressed so that everyone's needs is being balanced and appropriately accommodated. That is a good policy. We have nothing like that in California. Right. Vancouver is not nearly as extreme as what we have adopted in the state of California, unfortunately.
Okay, take a breath, all the guests, because I want to go back to the community. Malika.
Well, Julia, there's someone online here picking up on what you said earlier. You mentioned that parents need to follow the lead of their children. So our question here is, what do schools need to do? Paul says trans students are hugely disadvantaged and discriminated against, and any steps that schools can take to change that is really needed. So Julia, you have two younger children, if I'm correct on that, who are still in the school system.
I've got three younger children.
Younger children. So what is your ideal policy? What does that look like for how this is explained to them and how trans children are not discriminated against and not disadvantaged in schools?
Well, I think the current policy updates really go very much a long way in the right direction. So I think that's and as Patty said before, the current policy updates are really putting into policy what's already happening in the schools. So I think the policy updates are very much centered around supporting the family, supporting the student, and having room for individually accommodating those students. So I think I couldn't agree with them more.
All right, so have a look here on my laptop. This is a little piece by Global News BC. So I'm just going to play it because it's the family and some friends of yours, Cormac, all very happy, all very comfortable with the fact that you are Cormac, okay? No other person other than Cormac. So when you went through that process where you said, okay, family, school, I want to be a different person that I feel more comfortable about. Can you tell us what happened? How was it?
It was, the best thing that ever happened to me, truthfully. When I came out when I was 13, and I came out to my family first of all, and they were of course very loving and they really supported me, and I'm very thankful for that. And then we approached the school, and I have to say the school was extraordinary in how they reached out and tried to support me in whatever way they could. And that came from the students, that came from the staff, that came from parents or students who I didn't even know, who reached out and said, wow, thank you for contributing yourself to the school community and being who you are. And at the time, the biggest problem we had was that, I was amongst the first to really try and do this in a way where I didn't feel I had to leave my school and take on the secret identity at a new school. And so we really struggled in how is the best way of having me transition publicly in the school, and having the other students feel comfortable with me, and having the other students feel educated and that they didn't have to
So Cormac, can you help our audience understand this? I feel a lot of the opposition is because people are not really understanding your situation and how it is for you and your mum and your family. So tell us, did you take time off from school? Did you change your name? That first moment when you walked into class. These are milestones for you. Do you mind if we share them with you? All right, let's say, how much time did you take off school?
Well, I took 2 days. I took 2 days off school. What we ended up doing is there's a local organization here that goes into schools and does presentations on, inclusiveness and anti-bullying and LGBTQ, etc. issues and that sort of thing. So I took 2 days off school, and they came in with a counselor from the school and some administrators from the school, and they went around and we had an anti-homophobia and diversity consultant from the school board come with them. And they went around and they went to each of my classes and they said, this is where Cormac's at. Cormac, at the time I was Amber. Amber really feels that, he's a boy and he'd like, to be able to be accepted into the school in that way. And they sort of spoke a bit about what being transgender is, and they spoke a lot about what sort of the best way to include students would be. And
their reaction was what, Cormac? That moment you walked into your first class, what were their faces doing? How did they react?
It was almost a total non-event. I hate to say that.
Thanks for that. Nothing happened, Femi. Move on.
Not to let you down or anything. But
Nothing to see here.
I walked in and students came up to me and they said, "Hi, Cormac. Welcome back to school. You were gone for a couple of days, and we're really happy to see you," kind of thing. And in each of my classes, successfully throughout the day, people would say, "Hi, Cormac," and that was really it.
That's it.
I didn't, people didn't come up to me and say, "So are you going to have surgery now?" Or what's your,
very sensitive classmates, I have to say. So that's Cormac O'Dwyer. You want to hear more of his story, I'm sure. We are taking Cormac and Julia, his mum, and Patty and Brad all to the post show. And if you've got questions for them, shoot away. #AJStream. You'll hear your questions hopefully online in just a moment. Let me tell you about our next show. As more towns in Iraq are taken over by the rebel group ISIL, you, our community, have been asking what Iraqis think about the security crisis in their country. We will find out tomorrow. And if you have a question for our Iraqi guests, the hashtag #AJStream. Stay with us. The post show is next. Stream.aljazeera.com. See you there. Hello again, this is the Post Show where we're chatting about the rights of transgender students. So I'm going to go to a little video clip here. This is the Vancouver School Board when they were considering the transgender policy. Have a look on my laptop before I start it. I recognise CORMAC here. Julia Mum is standing beside him, and then we've got some students giving testimony. Have a listen to this.
To reiterate, every child deserves to feel comfortable and safe, especially at school where they are being educated and ready for transitioning out of adolescence. The years spent at school should be insightful, inspiring, and explorational, rather than traumatic. As I look around the room, I see many signs communicating the desire for protection of all children. So how does this policy go against that? The LGBT...
So when the crowd goes wild, Patti, you were there. It wasn't, everybody wasn't on board with this. There's been some quite, a lot of controversy, and two of the board members are now no longer board members. Talk me through what the opposition voices sound like. What were they upset about what you were about to do? What made them
and just
upset?
to be clear, those two board members are still board members, but they have been expelled from their political party organization, from their elected office. They were in opposition to the majority of the board. You know, what I saw was a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, and quite frankly, a lot of fear-mongering. Many of the opponents were people who English was not their first language. It was a predominantly Mandarin and Cantonese speaking group who had been part of an organization led by one woman, and they had a website set up and they had printed signs. And you know, I had a lot of conversations with some of those folks individually, and really they had been given a lot of inflammatory information that just simply wasn't accurate.
Like what, Patti? I mean, we're now broadcasting, so it's a good place to talk about what you may feel they were misinformed about, perhaps.
I think there was an issue, the issue of parent rights came up a lot. They felt that somehow this would erode their rights as parents to make decisions about their students, because there was references to the policy that we do provide confidentiality for students. And particularly, we believe that a student's personal information and their gender identity information is really their personal private information. And again, they should take the lead on what is shared with others and what is not.
Patti, I could see a lot of parents thinking the same thing. It was like, I would like to know if my child is transgender.
Right.
I would like to know that. I would like to be able to help them. I would rather that I knew about it and could share it with the school rather than the other way round. I can hear that as a, not misinformation, I think that that's a genuine concern. Brad?
Right.
And what
I like to...
What we hear is that, you know, in almost every case, it's really the parents know long before the school does and are part of that process.
Right.
We occasionally will have an older student, probably, you know, into high school, into the mid or late teens, who will have issues with someone at home and would like advice on how to have that conversation. Many students will still come out to a counselor or a safe contact at the school, and they will get advice on how to start that conversation at home. So the goal is always to include the families, unless there's a really compelling reason, or in some of the older students, they have already been rejected by their families. But ideally, we want to include that parent. Often it's the school staff who help the student have that conversation with their family.
You want to, but you don't have to, and that's the point where, Brad, I know you want to jump right in there. Go ahead, Brad.
That's absolutely right. I think, you know, we at Pacific Justice Institute are committed to defending the reason is simple, because parents play a critical role in the decision, the development of their children, the decisions they make in their development, and transgender and the path they take, whether it's you know, counseling in one direction or another direction, where the child is or where the young person is, what their needs are, is so important. You know, we're not talking about something minor here. You know, the studies show that half of transgender students will not live to see their 30th birthday. 25%, the new study just came out, say that 25% will die from suicide. Depression is a serious issue.
That's an outrageous statistic, Brad. Do you think parents are going to help being kept in that loop?
Well, that's what I'm saying. School district, the policies, a good policy is one that brings the parents into the equation, also brings the counselors into the equation. You know, some parents who may not understand where their child's going through, they need that counseling support. But that's once you start having a schism, and the school district plays any kind of a role, which I'm sure this is not the intent of Vancouver at all. But to separate the parent input and participation from the child, it makes it only more difficult. The child feels only more isolated. Depression becomes even more of a potential issue. That needs to be something that we need to try to stay away from, and I'm sure that Patti would agree with that.
I'd like to jump in there as well, because I am the parent of a transgender child. And, I have to say that I felt really fortunate that my child was able to come to me. But, there are those that genuinely can't. And I, as the parent, would really want for my child to be able to go and talk to a counselor, talk to a teacher, and have their confidentiality assured. Because I think unless the student is assured that their information will be kept confidential, they're not going to have the courage to go and talk to somebody. And I think that's where it breaks down. That if they're not confident that they can safely speak to a counselor, they're not going to. And I think that is exactly what we're trying to avoid, because I think the way to the parent for those kids that are having a hard time is through that counselor, is through that teacher. And I think it's absolutely crucial that they know that they can speak confidentially.
And by that same token,
counselor. Oh, go ahead, Cormac. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. By that same token,
Canadians are so polite.
We have confidentiality for students is already enshrined in law in BC, and that confidentiality extends to students in all sorts of circumstances, completely separate from being transgender. And it's also not appropriate, I think, to exclude transgender students from that protection by token of the fact that they're transgender.
All right.
Right?
So
let me just comment on that quickly. I think that confidentiality is right. It's very important in order for children and young people to get counseling, particularly when they have situations that they don't know how to deal with their parents. But when the school district starts to implement policies and how that child is to be treated or accommodated in ways that steer that child in a particular direction, that is when the parents need to be brought in, and psychiatrists and family counselors are nearly unanimous on this as the critical, important role
I'd have to challenge
that parents need to come in that situation.
These are child-directed, student-directed. We are not steering children in directions, and I think that's important to note. And CORMAC is right. In BC, British Columbia, we have law already that provides students the right to confidentiality, to consult even for medical treatment. They have that right under what is called the BC Infants Act, although it is in effect until they're 18. So this isn't a change, but what we wanted is people to understand that this was something that staff need to respect the confidentiality and take the lead of the student. Although, as in professional practice, there always will.
So, guess I hear all the different elements of that conversation, and as it's law, nothing's going to change right now. So let me just move things on a little bit. What's the community wanting to talk about now, Malika?
Well, there's a video comment submitted to us, and it's basically a view of Canada as a model. So, Julie, I'd actually like you to have a listen to this, and let me know what you think after.
As a Canadian citizen born and raised, my nation has been known for promoting and educating children on diversity as it pertains to ethnic, cultural, and religious differences. As stated in Section 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Equality Rights, I believe educating children in regards to diversity among individuals' gender identity, such as transgender, should also be welcome in public schools.
So, Julia, he says this is a very Canadian thing. Could Vancouver be a model for other places?
Well, I mean, I would most definitely like Vancouver to be a model, but I think we've got a long way to go still in Canada. Currently, we have Bill C-279 in the Senate, and that is a bill that would actually ensure that transgender Canadians will be protected from hate crimes and will be assured the right to equality. And I think it's really, really important that Canada shows what kind of a country it is and moves forward and actually passes that bill into law.
That's right.
So that's what I would really like to see happen, because I would like my children, those that are like my oldest and like my youngest, to be all equally protected under the law in this country.
And dare I say, Brad, I suspect that California is even a little bit ahead of Vancouver, right? In terms of being progressive with the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, they're definitely moving in that direction. And I think the problem with California, and I have to say this also to some degree with Canada, unfortunately, is that there needs to be also, tolerance, true tolerance and diversity isn't just for in one different in a specific area. And one problem we have in California, and I think in Colorado, or excuse me, in Canada, is showing disrespect of religious freedom. People have religious beliefs and convictions that are treated as if somehow they're inferior. They don't believe the right way. We're gonna we're gonna treat you differently. Right now in the law, for example, in Canada, it's statutorily prohibited for clergy to preach about what the Bible or what Scriptures teaches or the Torah teaches with regards to homosexual lifestyles and actions.
So Brad, what you're looking for is real dialogue, regardless of what your perspective is.
True diversity, true tolerance goes both ways. Teaches mutual respect, mutual accommodation. Unfortunately, in Canada and in California, we're having to fight that. And the goal is for mutual respect for people like CORMAC, and people also who have different religious beliefs and perspectives. That's a truly progressive society. That's what we at the Pacific Justice Institute are trying to achieve. And I encourage people to go to our Facebook at Pacific Justice Institute as well.
I wondered where this was going to. Shame on you, Brad. Let me grab the conversation back just for a moment. Nicely done. CORMAC, he's still talking. Man, okay. Thank you, Brad and Patti and Julia and CORMAC. CORMAC very kindly sent us some pictures of him. CORMAC, do you mind if I show them?
Oh, no.
All right, yes, you sent them to us. So, okay, here we go. Talk us through the pictures, because I love these pictures and I think it's a great way to end on. So, control room, roll the CORMAC pictures. Okay, what's going on here, CORMAC?
Well, this is me. Oh, and that's me and my two little brothers. Nice. One's very newly born there.
Okay.
Grade 7 graduation.
Your life is flashing in front of us as well, but in a good way. And that picture is what's happening there. And there.
That's the zoo, I'm pretty sure. Seattle Zoo.
Oh, well, we're making your mum laugh. Okay. Would you say right now in the space that you are in as CORMAC, sitting next to your mum, going on to new challenges, are you happy within yourself?
Well, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
I'm glad you had a short answer, because I'm over time. CORMAC and Julia and Patti and Brad, it's wonderful having spent time with you. Thank you so much for your time. Take care.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you guys.
So, moving on. Oh my goodness, we are changing the topic. As more towns in Iraq are taken over by the rebel group ISIL, you, our community, have been asking what Iraqis think about the security crisis in their country. We will find out tomorrow on AJ Stream. Until then, we'll be online. Take care.